welcome back. This is Richard, and welcome back to the Innovation Best Practices series of episodes, where every single one I take a look at it with the intention of helping you to sell more and make more. This is about innovation best practices that can work for any business, and I really only include stuff in here that I know is proven and practical that can help you be more profitable. So, with that said, let me tell you a little bit more about how you can listen to and learn from the Innovation Best Practices series of episodes. We have a VideoCast and a podcast. You can listen to the VideoCast on YouTube, and all you need to do is search the episode title in the search bar of YouTube, and you will see it at the top of your list. You can also listen to it as a podcast, and you can go to my website, i2ge, that's ge.com/podcast, or go to iTunes. You can also get the free app, Innovation Best Practices app, for both Apple and Android products. So if you're listening to this, the VideoCast is free, the podcast is free, and the apps are free. No reason not to listen. Separately, if you want to contact me, and I love to have listeners contact me, you can just send me an email at richard@i2ge.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Today is another in our series of interviews with Kari McNamara, who has probably led more big and small business innovation and inventing projects than anyone else in America. By big, I mean with big national and international corporations, and with small, I mean really small one-off operator sort of businesses. She lives in the Cincinnati area and helps many companies in that market with innovation and marketing. She's also led sessions that have produced multiple $100 million year one sales. And there's not a lot of people that can say that they've helped with developing ideas that big. Fortunately for me, she's a lead expert for my company, Innovate to Grow Experts, on that team at i2ge.com. So today, Kari's joining us with some amazing big ideas that came out of a session that she ran for a major client. I'm not going to tip too much more of what the story is about, and let's get into my interview with Kari. I'd like to welcome back Kari McNamara. For those of you listening to this podcast, the previous podcast talked about something very sweet and delicious. And in this particular podcast, we're going to dive into a case study that goes in a very different direction and actually went in some unexpectedly good directions for the client. And Kari's ability to guide and navigate that and come out with some big ideas on the other end, I thought would be a great story to share with our listeners. Kari, welcome back, and I'm interested to hear your story.
It's always lots of fun. Thanks for having me. So today I wanted to share a fun project that we worked on. It was probably one of the most intellectually stimulating and challenging projects that I've ever worked on, and so that's why I thought this would be a great one to share with you and your audience, because a lot of times when you're pushed, new and exciting things open up ahead of you, right? You have to make changes, you have to adapt, and that's why I thought this would be an interesting story to share. So we're working with Ethicon Endosurgery. It's a division of Johnson & Johnson, and they really specialize on laparoscopic surgical procedures. So laparoscopic obviously means minimally invasive, so you're not cutting someone open and going in and rooting around. You're going in usually through 1, 2, or 3 holes that are made traditionally in their abdomen or knee. And so the surgical space that they're working in is really, really small. So the innovation that's required is breathtaking in many cases. You're thinking, how on earth did someone figure this out, right?
Yeah.
To put all these different instruments and lights and everything down into this environment using just these 3 holes. So it's just a stunning field to work in, and so much fun with regards to catching up to how the process works when it comes to inventing a new medical device, what is required, right? What has to happen when you create a new medical device, the approval process, the clinical trials, and then ultimately the adoption rate. And just a number of interesting challenges along the way. So not only do you have to invent the actual product, you then have to get the surgeons to change their behavior, which I think is probably exponentially more challenging than getting consumers to change their behavior, because consumers buy a product, it doesn't work, they toss it out, they're mad and they're a little miffed about it, but they move on. Surgeons change their behavior, they lose a lot of money, right? Or a patient loses their life. It's much more important and impactful when they change their behavior. And it takes a lot longer too, because they've learned how to do this surgery in a certain way. And now you're introducing a new tool or a new skill or a new approach. They have to change the whole way that they're doing the surgery. So, just imagine that you can't drive to work the way you normally drive to work anymore. How long does it take you to adjust to the new route? And that's a relatively simple change. Here, they have to take something that, they've learned for 15 years and completely redo it in a totally different way. So the adaptation rate is a huge, huge challenge. So it's not just the innovation part of the equation that's a challenge, but getting it all the way through to where it's actually put into practice is a big deal. So that's what was really exciting about this particular session that we worked on. And this one was fun because we were working on laparoscopic abdominal surgeries, and in particular gastric bypasses. We were looking for ways to make that more efficient and effective for the patients and for the doctors. So what kind of tools could we use? How could we better improve the tools and the procedure to really deconstruct the whole thing, break it all down, look at all the steps that are involved, look at how the tools are working currently, and then put it all back together in a way that's better and more effective. It increases the healthy outcomes, it increases the longevity of the surgery. It's something that the surgeons are willing to make the adaptations and put into place. So some critical success factors there. And I mean, just talk about blow your mind type of stuff. Here all the instruments come in, the surgeons we had to watch all the videos, right? And we had the option of going and viewing an actual procedure in a viewing room as well. So again, getting the mindset right, as we've talked about previously, is critically important. And especially in a case like this where most of the team doing the inventing has zero surgical experience, right? So the team from Ethicon, they've been in the surgery rooms, they've seen the surgeries happen, they've watched the videos, but they're not surgeons, right? In most cases. In some cases they were veterinarians, but in most cases they've not actually performed any surgical procedures. And then, you've got me and my team. We're obviously not surgeons, and it's a good thing too, because we'd probably not be too happy with those types of outcomes. So we're all trying to say, okay, here's how you, surgeon, expert person on the planet who knows how to do this, here's hundreds of different ways that you can do what you know how to do exceptionally better. And we did have some surgeons in the room, which was fantastic. We brought in 4 of the top surgeons from around the country. The guy who invented the gastric bypass procedure was there. His understudy, so the next in line, was there, and then 2 other top-notch doctors. So we absolutely had the expertise in the room. We had the experts from Ethicon. We had my team. So we had the right mix. Now the question was, could we actually pull this off? Can we invent, in a traditional inventing session, surgical tools that change the way surgeons operate? And it was a little shaky at the beginning, to be honest with you, because here they bring out all these foam body parts, right? They're walking us through the surgery, they're showing us how the tools work, and we're sitting here thinking, man, they've got this down pat, 47 minutes in, out, done. Is there room for improvement? I don't know. So we're all kind of a little bit on edge thinking, maybe we can't do this. Maybe we can't pull this off. But we dove in anyway. We pulled out the stimulus. We started playing with the foam stomachs. We were digging into the tools. Well, how does this work, and why does this have to be the size that it is? And mostly what we used in this particular session was kind of the takeaway approach, which the best way I can explain that is think about contact lenses, right? So you look at eyeglasses and how eyeglasses work. If you take away the frames, you take away the nose supports, you take away the structure on the outside of the lenses so that you're just left with the lenses, and then you say, well, how do you put those into your eye? That's essentially how you could kind of back into the idea of contact lenses. Well, we applied that quite liberally in this particular session, right? If you take away this casing, if you take away this component, if you take away this, what are we left with? And what are the critical components that are needed, and what needs to happen during this surgery? As we're following this kind of line of thinking, we said, well, okay, let's push pause for a minute. what's the big thing here that's really going to help our surgeons? Like, how do the surgeons make money? Like, what's their business model look like? And it turns out that most surgeons typically have 1 or 2 days a week that are their surgery days. Most surgeons have 1 day a week. Some surgeons will have two, but most have one. And then the rest of the time, they're either doing hospital visits, patient follow up, they're doing office work. So that one surgical day is critically important for them from a revenue perspective because that's their big money making day. They make money seeing patients in the office and doing things like that, but the big bucks come when they're in the surgery room performing the surgery. We also learned that every time a surgery runs over, so traditionally surgery rooms are booked in half-hour increments. So if your surgery takes 32 minutes, that's a huge cost for the surgeon. The surgeon has to pay for that overage time. Then it really messes up the economics for the whole rest of the day too. So now we've got a couple of other really interesting dimensions that we're working against, right? There's this timing effect. If they go over, they get this big cost penalty that hurts their profitability, and how long the actual surgical procedure takes in total. So we're thinking along lines of how do we get them to change their behavior? So it's assume the miracle happens. We create this amazing new tool or this amazing new approach for doing this procedure. How do we get them to adapt? And it turns out that there was magic in both ends of the equation. We were able to create about 18 new surgical instruments to be used in the gastric bypass procedure itself. So the Ethicon team left that session, filed for 18 or 19, I don't remember the exact number, of new patents for surgical tools coming out of the work that we did. So mission accomplished with regards to creating the actual surgical tools. But the other two dimensions that we then stumbled upon quite by accident turned out to be a huge profitability center for them with regards to teaching, retraining, educating, and rolling out these new tools, and just with regards to adoption rates across their current line, which was understanding the business dimension of how surgeons make money. And one thing we were able to realize is if we can get them in and out of the surgery suite in 30 minutes or less, they could add a whole additional patient procedure to their day, which would in turn increase their revenue anywhere from 20 to 30% if they added one new patient every day of their surgical schedule. So if they operate every Tuesday and they can traditionally only do 4 patients a day, now they can do 5 patients a day, they're going to see about a 25% increase in their profits. And if they have 2 surgical days, well, then obviously they can double their revenue. So this is a really exciting and compelling proposition. And this requires nothing more than them maybe buying a couple of Ethicon's existing tools that are already in their lineup and making a few simple changes to the procedure that they're currently doing so they can get in and out of the operating room without, and then again, removing that cost penalty. If they go over the operating room schedule time, that's a huge increase in their revenue as well. So just not only thinking about here's the mission at hand, but having the ability to push that pause button and say, bigger picture, right? Bigger picture. Think through the whole entire chain of events, because you're going to do something on the front end here, creating a new product or service, changing behavior in some way. What's the ripple effect, right? What's the domino effect as you look downstream to say, well, how does this impact this and how does this change that? And can we borrow and bring in some inspiration from those types of changes as well? Was one of the most exciting reasons I wanted to share this story with you, because that was a big surprise for us. We did not expect to stumble across that. We weren't looking for it. Now, I'll tell you what, every time since I've done that session, I always look for it because it was so powerful to find it. So now I know, now it's on my radar screen, and hopefully it'll be on everybody else's as well. Thinking upstream and downstream as opposed to, here's the specific problem that I have to solve. You definitely want to solve that problem, but connecting the dots out further can oftentimes lead you to even bigger and more amazing solutions.
Absolutely great story. I had not been in a session like this ever, and to hear you talk about it is absolutely inspiring. Want to just kind of focus on a few points that you made, Kari, that I think can translate to different environments in terms of principles that are going on here. first, I really applaud you for the diversity of people that you brought into the session itself. People from J&J that were not surgeons, your team, clearly not surgeons. No offense, but my next surgery will not be done by anybody from the Kari McNamara team.
No,
I love you, but not that much. and you had four.
I love you enough not to operate on you.
Thank you. And you had 4 top surgeons from around the country, including the guy who invented all of this. And that's kind of the mix. I mean, when you can bring together, I mean, you're trying to get, I mean, it's an overused term, and I'm going to use it just because people will immediately know what it means, but it's really out of the box thinking. And it's difficult to get out of the box thinking if you have a group of people that, if your group is made up only of people who live in the box. But when you bring together this combustible, talented, inspired group of people who live outside the box, live near the box, and live in the box, which as you did here, that is a very powerful combination to really get some great thinking going on. So lots of stuff going on there is very good. The second point that I think is that early on in the session you had some misgivings and everything, but you dove right in and there was lots of stimulus. I wrote down here foam stomachs. I'm not sure I ever want to hear that term again, but it's a lot of stimulus that really gets people into it rather quickly, and the power of stimulus that gets things done. And the third point that I really, really love is your openness that got you to not only 18 new instruments with patents and everything that J&J can use. I mean, that paid for the session plus out, several times over. But the insight of what drove the profitability of surgeons, for surgeons, it's kind of like you take a look. Sometimes we can get wrapped up, well, they need new shiny instruments, state of the art and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, they got to change their habits and practices, and we got to get them to adapt. How do we do all that? I mean, that's a path that you do on this and other sorts of projects. But you zeroed in on what really makes a difference for surgeons, which is the profitability. And by getting them to under 30 minutes, you not only avoided the cost penalties of going over, but got them that one extra patient per day. And if you want to talk about something that can, really get surgeons adopting these new procedures and tools and instruments and everything, wow, what a way to do that. If you go, I mean, I'm a former sales guy. If I can walk into a surgeon and say, guess what? You can
double your revenue.
You can double your revenue and avoid all the cost penalties.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a really fascinating world to dive into. Again, from a consumer perspective, they're a little more forgiving because the changes that you're asking them to make are not as instrumental. But here, you have to understand they've studied for decades to perfect this procedure, and now you're coming to them in kind of the middle of their biggest money-making time, right? I've mastered it, I'm out there cranking it, I've got my practice built up, patients are coming to me, I'm in the groove, and you want to do what? You want me to do what? It's like, why would they do that? They wouldn't unless you give them a really powerful reason, which is what led us to ask that question right in the first place, is what would it take to get them to be more adaptable, to go unlearn what they spent 2 decades learning?
Yeah, and that's a great lesson too. I have a previous podcast on the power of curiosity and the power of asking questions in combination with that. What if? What is the magic? Just asking questions. You don't need to know the answers, but if you in a group with the kind of talent that you have and you start asking questions, the unexpected answers that you get all of a sudden unlock doors that you never saw before you asked the question. So it's this process of asking questions that's very powerful. So another great story that I really, really appreciate your sharing, and I hope everyone listening to this podcast understands that while this was about surgery and everything, there's principles that Kari shared with us here that I think can apply to virtually every business with any kind of innovation need. So Kari, thank you very much for sharing an absolutely wonderful and inspiring story.
My pleasure.
That was quite the case study. And Kari, as usual, was spectacular in getting the results that she did. If you want to learn more about innovation best practices, all you need to do is go to my website at i2ge.com. On the menu bar is an item that says DIY, Do-It-Yourself Innovation Training. If you click on that, there's all kinds of innovation training for all kinds of needs. Having said that, it's not meant to cover every possible need, so if your need is not listed there, just contact me at richard@i2ge.com and we will develop a tailored program for your unique situations. Also, if you want help, I've published 6 books. One of them is called Proven Practical Innovation That Delivers Results. It's available in paperback and as a Kindle book only on Amazon. And I sell it at below break-even pricing so everybody can gain access to it. So, if you have suggestions, comments, or requests, I love to hear them because this podcast and this VideoCast is not for me, it's for you. And if I can make it better for the listeners, I'm going to do it, just as the creation of this VideoCast format in 2016 was one of those projects that came out of the learning from listeners. So, look forward to hearing from you. In the next podcast and VideoCast, Kari returns, fortunately, and she's going to share another case study where the client realizes in the middle of the session that they're inventing for the wrong need. Yes, you got that right. They're paying 6 figures to bring people in, and they're inventing for the wrong need. Learn what Kari did to rescue the project in a major way. You'll learn what she did and how she did it, and it will absolutely help your innovation program. Well, I've enjoyed my time with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope, more importantly, you've learned something. And as always, I really, really want to thank you for your time listening to this podcast. It's greatly appreciated, and I hope it helps with you. If it does help you, I would appreciate you going to iTunes and giving us a 5-star rating and writing a review. Thanks. Have a great day.